honestly, just watching this movie, I just can't help but be struck by the deep, deep irony that exists in the delay of this film. And it makes me wonder, like, when that conversation came up, what was your first reaction to it, just knowing what the movie was?
It's very meta. I mean, the movie is about cancel culture, and it got canceled. So it was very, very meta.
As it was happening, we were all just like, this is the movie. This is literally the movie right now. I was looking out for arrows, because I'm like, this is what's happening. But,
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and was there any hesitation? Like, when that idea was brought up, like, did you kind of go with it knowing that it did fit thematically with the movie?
Yeah. I definitely, if I had it to do over again and could get what I wanted, I would not have taken the movie off the schedule. I mean, it was no part of it was happy, but except that I'm glad the movie is finally coming out.
Yeah,
I certainly wished it would have come out in September.
Okay.
People can finally see it now. Judge for themselves.
I think it was pretty insane. It's the most meta advertising campaign we could have asked for. I also think knowing that the world moves so fast and that the internet is such a can be a garbage fire, and that to just breathe and put our phones down and look at the horizon for a little while was probably the best solution.
It was just an incredibly surreal experience because as the controversy was happening, I was saying, but it was just a joke. Like, the movie's supposed to be fun, and then realizing, oh, these are things that characters in the movie actually say. Yeah. No one's gonna believe when they see this movie that we didn't reshoot all this material. Sure. But for a movie that's about kind of being misunderstood or a misunderstanding going to like extreme absurdity, that's what it sort of felt like. I mean, obviously we were taking it very seriously as it was happening, but now that the movie is finally coming out, I hope to have much more of a sense of humor about it.
And I understand it didn't change at all in the last 6 months.
We changed nothing
at all.
Yeah.
Not a frame?
Not one frame.
Really?
Not one word, not one frame. No, it was very important to me that we released, we talked about it, obviously, but I wanted to release exactly the movie that we were intending on releasing in September, and that's what's getting released.
And just, I mean, one thing that really struck me about this film is that it is very much a horror comedy. Like, it is an equal pairing, just as horrific as it is really funny, and that is part and parcel with the satire. I'm curious just about the process of, like, basically managing that tone throughout the production, and especially with you, just knowing your comedic background and the fact that you are mostly playing it straight, just kind of your process to the character.
Craig Zobel's an amazing director, and we discussed it a lot. We had a couple Skype calls where we kind of talked about what this guy's kind of roots are and why he ended up here and who he is, and we had this big conversation about how you want to root for him because you don't know where he is and then kind of where he lands, and I just kind of trust him so much. He's so great with actors. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Compliance, but like, it's an incredibly powerful movie where he got actors to do crazy things. And then when you talk to him for a few minutes, he just makes you so calm and lets you really kind of shine. So I really give credit to Craig Zobel for shaping that character a lot.
In post-production, it was an act of balancing to make sure, like, when are we allowed to go into a comedic moment, or when can we use a comedic moment to undercut some sort of action or horror beat. The goal was really to make something absurd and fun, and so the hope was that we would kind of consistently pursue that, basically. Sure.
Yeah, and we kept, I think, keep turning back to the game, to the hunt. That was what was our sort of one of our, I think, beacons for sort of in figuring out what the movie ultimately was. Like, there's sort of moments that when it sort of felt that it strayed too much from that, you actually just wanted to be back on that roller coaster because it's so many twists and turns, and that's sort of the heart of the movie, and that's where it was in its sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think horror and comedy share a lot, to get a physical reaction in whether you jump or a laugh, and there's a lot of scary movies have, the Insidious movies are 30% jokes, between Specs and Tucker. And it actually makes the movie scary. When you're laughing, you're kind of relaxing and you're more susceptible to being scared.
Yes. Sure.
And actually, I do want to ask about kind of Crystal's emotional state in this film, because obviously a lot of characters are freaked out, but when we first see her, she's making a compass. She's already like doing her thing to try and survive. And I'm just kind of curious about kind of metering her emotional status, because she's also kind of always on that level.
Yes, totally. Yeah, I think that Crystal probably, I think it's difficult because almost talking about what's going on in Crystal's brain to me is a spoiler, because I think that it's fun as an audience member to kind of decide for yourself who Crystal is and what's going on with her. I will say I thought a lot about what Crystal is like in normal circumstances, and probably, at the DMV, she's the weirdest person in the room. But in this strange apocalyptic circumstance, it kind of matches what's going on in her brain. So she's more at home here than she is at a baby shower.
She does need to renew her registration, though.
Yeah.
So eventually.
But she's going to lose her temper.
Eventually,
It doesn't
we
happen.
all do.
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, just part of that, I feel like the Jackrabbit and Box Tortoise story is very informative about kind of where she comes from. I'm just curious, like, that's a very different take on the tortoise and the hare that I've ever heard. So where did that come from, and just how did it inform your performance?
Well, for every character, I try to think of, no matter what the genre is, finding the Greek circumstances, because, I like to play high stakes, even if those stakes are sort of muffled to be in a scene, about laundry, of which I do many as a lady.
I couldn't imagine higher stakes, by the way. Like, what if a pink sock gets in there?
Yeah.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the Jackrabbit story to me is about a feeling that is similar to that, where if you feel like you're supposed to be a revolutionary or the hero in your own story, and then somewhere along the way you lose your way, or the circumstances of your life don't match those Greek circumstances that you feel inside. I think a lot of us feel that way, where, we're bred to be warriors, and then you're sitting in traffic, or your iPhone update has erased all your contacts. And you're like, what embarrassing circumstances for a gladiator like myself to be in. And I
Peak
think
of
that
evolution, right?
Yes, yeah. And I think that this movie, however horrifying the circumstances are, it's really sort of Crystal's chance to actualize in a really demented way.
Yeah, certainly when Nick and I wrote that scene, one of the messages of the movie is that we're not going to give you a message. And I think that we all hear these Aesop's fables at the tortoise and the hare, and I always sort of thought, like, this is a horrible moral, which is basically like, if you just keep on keeping on, but it only works if the person that you're racing against is incredibly arrogant and likes to take naps. And in the real world, that person, if they lost, there would be vengeance.
Yeah.
And so let's just, I'm always curious what happens after the fable. So if anything, that scene illustrates what happens when you wag your finger at someone and try to teach them a lesson. Your finger might find itself getting bitten off.
So I'm always curious just about the evolution of projects, and going from the first draft of this to what we see in the finished cut, how would you say that it kind of changed the most over time?
The first.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the draft that we sort of that anyone saw besides Damon and I was pretty similar to what the final movie was.
Yeah.
We did at the end, there's a big fight sequence, and we just sort of said, this is going to be a crazy fight sequence. So Craig was hugely responsible for, I think, turning it into something that was actually more than a sentence on a page. So that changed, in that it was born.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that, as we watched the movie, I was lucky to be there on set, and Craig and I were sort of constantly trying to respond in small ways to like what we were seeing from the performances and stuff, and finessing things, but...
For sure, yeah. I would say that like the actors, especially Betty and Hillary, but truly like all of the actors kind of brought. I think everybody knew what we were trying to do, and we were all kind of lockstep in trying to like achieve that and amuse each other every day. And so there was some level where I felt like it. You read something and you're like, that's funny, that works, and then all of a sudden in the making of it. You have this other voice that comes in and like helps define it even more so, and really like clarify why it's funny. So. Yeah.